I remember, first grade St. Bede School in Chicago, 1985, age 5 to 6. We did all line up to take these hearing tests. I remember the random puzzles and games, the unique headphones, the strange tones. I remember something being discussed about how I might be gifted. A room in the school that was only for this testing that we never returned to in older grades. I have a vague memory of chalky sweet drinks, but can't confirm. What I surely remember is having a lot of astral travel dreams where I would escape my house after the grown-ups went to sleep, through a window, then fly over the neighborhood where I would meet up with the other kids from my class. I remember we all flew together like birds over our houses, collecting other students along the way, laughing and tumbling through the sky. I also remember that we, the classmates, had coordinated this together somehow, especially the feeling that we had all planned to meet up that night out of body, and our excitement in the fact that we accomplished this goal. I remember talking to someone the next morning who was really excited and confirmed the experience. For some reason, the topic became forgotten and never spoken of again. I remember only a few of us had to go back for follow-up testing. Then only me and 2 others. Then I was put on Ritalin. Was it all a dream?
Gifted and talented programs in elementary schools aim to provide advanced learning opportunities for students who demonstrate exceptional abilities. What is a gifted program? Definition: a gifted program is an educational program designed for students who show high scores on cognitive ability tests or demonstrate exceptional skills in specific areas. Gifted children are exceptional individuals who show high scores, for their ages, on tests of cognitive ability. Purpose: these programs offer a curriculum that is more challenging and advanced than regular classroom instruction, helping gifted students develop their potential and avoid boredom. This allows gifted children to be challenged, to allow them to fully develop their natural skills and prevent behavioral problems associated with boredom. Placement: students are typically placed in these programs based on test scores, teacher recommendations, and sometimes parent input. As far as I can tell, it was based mainly on scores from standardized testing. Benefits of gifted programs: faster pace and enriched curriculum. Gifted programs move at a faster pace and cover more complex topics. Gifted school moved at a much faster pace. Also, we were exposed to more subjects. Smaller, supportive environment. These programs often provide a smaller, more supportive environment where gifted students can interact with peers who understand their unique challenges. Gifted schools get it. Kids there understand each other better, and the classes are designed for how we learn. Emotional and social benefits. Being with like-minded peers can help gifted students feel more accepted and less isolated. There are so many benefits to having them at this school, and I'm so grateful. Challenges and criticisms. Pressure and stress. Some parents can put too much pressure on their gifted children, leading to stress and anxiety. Pressuring your child, any child, gifted or not, to perform can cause serious issues for them. Equity and access. There can be concerns about equity and access, as gifted programs may disproportionately benefit students from wealthier families who have access to additional resources. Students tend to be more affluent. Parents send kids to private tutors and testing academies so they can improve their odds of being accepted. Teacher training and support. Not all teachers are adequately trained to meet the specific needs of gifted learners. The biggest myth about giftedness is that they are the brightest and best students available. In reality, they are still kids who have processing skills ahead of their peers.
Anybody ever part of the GATE program? Consciousness. In the U.S., 15 to 20 years ago, there was a program in elementary schools called the GATE program. Separate classrooms for gifted kids. I was not part of the program, but I was put into the class a few times in 2006 to 2007. I have heard and read accounts of kids being pulled aside from the rest of the class from men not from the school and given really weird tests. Are there any of you that have gone to this program? Any stories? I do not know if it was throughout all of the states. I only know California, where I'm from. I only ask is because some people said they were given psychic tests, and that tracks given the government had something called the Stargate program.
This program wasn't a secret for everyone. I spoke to a therapist today about these memories, and they were actually shocked others had ever forgotten/thought the program was a secret. Their sibling had been selected in elementary school in the 90s for service, and they both were in the program. Heavy military presence area. There were details they had forgotten, like the pink drink, but the overall gist of the program wasn't forgotten or a secret to them. Just thought that was fascinating. My memories spontaneously surfaced when journaling about childhood friends this month, and are still shrouded in cotton, but are backed up by my own siblings' more extensive memory of the program. My sibling was also in special ed classes due to hearing issues, but was still extensively psi-tested like us in the GATE program. So it wasn't just high IQ kids being psi-tested.
They definitely knew psychic abilities are real and not nonsense. They were trying to find the kids with the best psychic abilities. 100%. I'm starting to believe they were even tracking families based on oral history of inherited psychic abilities. My family has been known for generations as psychic. This is something I've always quietly suspected about my family in an intuitive way, without ever discussing it or seeing it discussed in this context until your comment. Not trying to get too conspiratorial or anything, but I've seen speculation that certain individuals might have their potential intentionally hindered if they weren't able to follow the right way, whatever that means.
I have read about this in other forums, but there's the speculation that certain people from powerful, wealthy families have been taken down by drugs, mental illness, suicide, etc., and it's possible the families had ties to the government and intelligence agencies, as well as potentially foreign governments. The whole CIA sleeper agent, MK Ultra thing. And what if there was a way to hinder the progress of an entire generations to ensure the current generation stays on top? The GATE program is really the perfect experiment. They get to train certain kids to become their secret weapon. But the ones who are rebellious and unable to follow the rules, but have been proven to have special abilities, well, can't let them get too powerful, right? I think that's where the handlers come in. Then they would potentially also be tracking this person's family for generations. I realize how crazy it all sounds, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised at this point.
I feel like the way my mom seems to have been tracked backs up my intuition on this. Especially because anime culture-related science ties back to the Nazis, and they were so obsessed with genetics. Honestly, my whole worldview has changed because I wasn't even that familiar with culture. It's kind of validating to realize our powers are notable though. We all have centuries of patterning to keep quiet about any special powers too if your family was targeted by witch hunts. Let's all remember we are more powerful than they'd like us to believe.
We all sort of knew GATE was some kind of experiment, M9. My 5th grade teacher actually described it as an experimental education system, M7. What haunts me is that no one knows or will admit who was in charge of it. Whoever they were, I know it was bigger than my class, my school, or even my state. People in other states report very detailed things that I always thought were unique to my class, but I now know that not to be the case. One odd but specific detail I recall is that we did not have individual desks, M10. We sat at community tables named after certain geographic locations, M10. The tables had different rules, M10. We periodically moved tables according to some performance metrics, M10. Our lowest ranking table was called Siberia, M10, which was almost a kind of in-class detention for overdue assignment modules. At some point I had about 40 overdue assignments, M9, so I spent a lot of time in Siberia. M10, my class was in CA M10+, but somebody here from a military school in Nevada also reported a similar table named Siberia. This suggests a very scripted curriculum enshrined in a very elaborate and highly scripted process that was bigger than the state level. An even bigger question is, what were they looking for? How many hundreds or thousands of kids did they need to test for ESP before they could legitimately figure out if it was either a real thing or a bunch of quackery? No offense if you believe or don't believe, but I certainly can attest that I was systematically tested for every imaginable parapsychological phenomenon, including telekinesis, M5, precognition, M8, mind reading, M4, remote viewing, M6, and was hypnotized, M9, with audio modules and other techniques, M5. to the point that I can barely remember 3rd and 4th grade. An even stranger question is that if they knew ESP was nonsense, why would they continually test decades worth of kids from all over the place? Any attempt to legitimately and rationally figure it out only leads to a bottomless pit of overly sensationalized conspiracy theories that I don't want to believe, even though I literally had a front row seat to it all for at least 6 years. M10.
The M hashtag, it's a personal notation that helps me track my memory in a more objective way and attempt at least to add some traceability to my subjective recall of gate events. The number after the M is a 0 to 10 scale of memory resolution. M10 is 100% certain while M5 is only about 50% clear. Mainly it's because my gate memory is episodic at best, and I try hard not to confabulate information man-facepalming. Unlike almost all other things in my life, my school days in gate are pretty fragmented, and what I am left with are some really odd ESP testing type memories and things that feel more like a series of hypnotic hangovers in retrospect. Many people only remember it as accelerated learning, and it definitely was that, but the more of the onion I peel back, the more I am convinced that there was a subset of GTSters that underwent some pretty experimental, well choreographed and dual-purpose pseudo-psychological stuff, nothing overtly nefarious by my memory, yet still very quirky.
I think it's fascinating that some people forget they were in. It was such a big part of my schooling, and I was in a family with multiple children in the program, so it was always framed as a point of pride in my family. Even a sibling that wasn't in the program still interacted with my instructor in class occasionally and during the GATE family fun nights. I have many memories from the program/field trips in the years that I was in, and I've had questions about what was actually going on since I graduated. After I graduated and I started to talk to other people about their schooling experiences, it finally sunk in how weird my experience was. Even with how much I remember and how long I've had to digest what happened, been out of school for almost 20 years. It's a hard and frustrating experience. Wishing you the best as your memories come back to you.
I mentioned it to my psychiatrist too, and at first she didn't really know what I was talking about, and then she said, "Oh yeah, I think ours was called Odyssey of the Mind." But we didn't discuss it in depth since that wasn't the purpose of our session. I also talked about it with my therapist, but she wasn't familiar with it at all. At least she will entertain my conspiracy theories.
I was tangentially related to it, in that I wasn't actually considered a part of the program, but I still underwent a lot of the same things that people here report. The pink drink wasn't a drink, and they were always very clear that you weren't supposed to drink it. It really is just a fluoride solution. I got literally the exact same thing at my private dentist's office all the way until high school as part of a fluoride treatment, since my family has genetically fairly soft enamel otherwise. It's extremely common in areas with widespread well water use or just general poverty, since a lot of poor students don't get regular access to dental cleanings. There were definitely kids who drank some of it anyway and made themselves sick. I had to undergo a battery of testing for ADHD due to suspicion from teachers, which I distinctly remember because it absolutely enraged my parents, who refused to go any further with it, and I ended up having to deal with it later in life because it turns out denying your kid had ADD/ADHD doesn't just magically make it go away. I got kicked out of the gifted program after a few months because of it, since I was so disruptive to the other students, except for when they were doing their chess unit, where I was specifically pulled from normal classes to go play chess and hoop the shit out of them, which I learned later in life was at least partly to help deflate some of their egos and remind them that general intelligence doesn't mean universal expert, since I was the best chess player in the school who wasn't in the course. I remember lots of testing about psychic testing, and even lots of the kids at school messing around with it after they test on it, because it became a fun little fad. Pretty much every classroom had a copy of the game set, because it helped teach pattern recognition, and it was pretty common for all of us to use it to try to do ESP. In hindsight, it's not terribly surprising. The 90s treated psychics like the 2020s are treating AI. The X-Files, Miss Cleo, the popularity of ghost mediums. Just like they can't resist trying to jam underbaked AI slop into schools now, they couldn't help but jam badly designed psychic power evaluation stuff in the 90s. That said, I'll also say that my observation as a child was that a lot of those kids were being set up by their parents for failure. There were a lot of kids who clearly needed some sort of therapy or medicine or both. There were a lot of kids whose parents pushed them way too hard, and I watched them burn out in real time as we got older. I don't think the program messed up kids intentionally so much as its programming was predisposed to select kids who were already kinda messed up or in the process of being messed up.
GATE programs typically require students to undergo specific testing. The most common test is the COG-AT, Cognitive Abilities Test, which is a standardized test used to assess reasoning abilities. Criteria of eligibility to attend a GATE program may vary a bit from one state to another, but will often revolve around the COG-AT, which is pretty much a light IQ test. Percentile rank. Students usually need to score above the 98th percentile to qualify. The GATE threshold usually is scoring above the 98th percentile rank, i.e. performing better than 98% of same-aged children. IQ threshold. Some programs may also consider IQ scores, often requiring a score around 130.
Hi.
I tested positive for giftedness in the 2000s or late 90s. I was told the threshold was 130. Application process. Referral and testing. Students can be referred by their teachers or parents for GATE testing. This often happens in the 2nd or 3rd grade. My 6-year-old kid just tested and got into the GATE program in her school.
Is this usual?
Evaluation. The school district will evaluate the test scores and other factors to determine eligibility. I was pulled out of class to test for GATE and put into a very small single desk room completely by myself. Program structure. Pull-out programs. Many GATE programs involve pulling students out of their regular classrooms for specialized instruction. We were bused to a designated school once a week for a multi-level all-day class with other gifted kids. Full-time GATE. Some districts offer full-time GATE classrooms where students are grouped together for all subjects. My son currently is in full-time GATE and we love it. Curriculum. The curriculum often includes advanced topics, problem-solving, and creative projects. We dissected an earthworm, frog, a cow eyeball, and studied animal behavior.
Just because it wasn't your experience doesn't mean it didn't happen. Not everyone in these programs were treated the same way at all. I was in the earliest GATE program in the 70s. It was a pilot program for our school district, and our school was one of the schools that was part of the program. I remember we had a temporary classroom trailer outside of the school that I was brought to. I was shown cards with symbols and asked to guess the next in a pattern. I was taught how to speed read, and specifically they were looking to reduce my inner monologue. There were people present that were not my teachers. I talked about this with my mom, and she wasn't really even told about the program at all. Project Stargate was 100% real. Take a look at this archive of documents of what was released by the CIA. It involved remote viewing and other psychic spy programs. There really was a psychic Cold War between the US and the Russians at the time, and there is every indication that even when the Cold War ended, these programs continued even after Project Stargate itself was ended. It is very weird and suspicious that that school started to offer the gifted and talented program. Curiously, my school also weirdly conducted the Army aptitude test on my entire class in an auditorium. We were the last class in our school district with over 500 people until the millennials came through. Project Stargate was for the Army with the help of the CIA. We also know that our government, and especially the CIA, has a terrible publicly known track record of doing things to the American people without them knowing. So I would just caution you that just because you specifically, and maybe many people, did not have this experience, it doesn't mean that everyone did not. We should be suspicious of the naming and timing of this program and ask for more government transparency and not less.
I had a similar experience in the early 70s. I went to school in the Southwest. About 10 students were pulled out from class to have people from the local university quiz us on science topics. I don't remember how many times per month we met, but one of the testers spoke Spanish to me, which I had a very limited fluency. In one of the experiments, he was demonstrating how gravity works and narrated the entire time in Spanish and asked me to say what I thought the experiment was about in English. When I answered gravity, he gave me a shocked look and asked me how I knew that. I told him I didn't know and that I liked to read books about atoms. I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade at the time. I also remember one day we had a substitute teacher who taught us how to draw the flower of life using plastic cups. It's the only thing we did all day, and every time I looked up at her, she was smiling, and she told us we could make as many of them as we wanted. I even grabbed a cup at home after school and kept drawing them with different size cups and bottle caps. What can I say? I was a weird kid, lol. Interesting to see others who have had similar experiences. Had the same experience. I remember vividly a trailer with computers. It smelled weird. Like static? Like when you touch one of those lightning globes. It's what your hands smell like after. A mix of that, plus a little mothball. And when you walk into a greenhouse. I know it's such a weird description. I remember it was dimly lit and very cold. I was given a hearing test. I now know it sounded like deep theta, but at the time, I remember it tickled my ears on the inside, bouncing back and forth from left to right ear. I always liked that part. Then they would show me cards and lay them face down and mix them up and ask me to find like the first card they showed me or the sixth. I loved the match game. Sometimes they would just mix them up, pull one out, and I would find the other. They were weird symbols and shapes. There were always two people, always. One never said a single word ever, and the other gave the tests. I was always good at looking at something for a second and seeing it in my mind again. I still can. It's like pausing a video in my mind. Then I would always get to play Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego.
I was also in the earliest GATE programs in 1973, and I was taught to speed read and shown patterns and symbols, and other testing including a telepathy test. It was a really strange time in my life too. I had premonition dreams beginning then, could tell my parents who was calling, other intuitive things I had no way of knowing. I don't know if it's related or not, but my dad was a high-ranking FAA engineer, and he was a part of MK Ultra when in the Navy. I have seen that there is a podcast tying MK Ultra and GATE together I need to watch apparently. I have always wondered if my experience and my dad's were connected, or if that had anything to do with me being in GATE. Another classmate was in GATE with me. Her dad was also in FAA with my dad. Sometime in the late 70s they asked my dad if we would relocate to Saudi Arabia, and my mom freaked and we didn't go, but my classmate's family did. She came back a different person. I only found this sub today because of the drone activity in NJ. Being from there and my dad's involvement with FAA led me to the UFO sub, and there was a GATE post on there. And now I am completely down the rabbit hole, and wondering exactly what I was and possibly am part of.
During my years working in the schools and in my private practice, I have met many indigos. I find them to be wise, intuitive, caring, and curious, and they often have a spark, which seems to challenge the existing educational and societal constructs. Many students who have been diagnosed with ADHD are indigos. It's as if the characteristics that define one describe the other: out of the box, right-brained and otherwise unconventional learner, and global thinker. In addition to the previous descriptors, indigos are often described as old souls. They may be immature, yet older than their years. They like animals and nature. They might seem to have low self-esteem while simultaneously acting grandiose. The rebellious spirit of the indigo seems to say, "I know I'm here for a purpose. I know that the way we treat each other and our Earth is supposed to change. I'm tired of waiting. Let's get on with it." Indigo children are described as being born in 1978 or later, yet many born prior to 1978 will see themselves in the indigo descriptors. Authors Nancy and Tapp, Lee Carroll and Jan Tober have written about indigo children. Doreen Virtue, in her book The Care and Feeding of Indigo Children, offers a complete list of characteristics. At the time of their identification, indigo children were not as common as they are now. Over the years, I have encountered many more of these students. The qualities of indigos also seem to be changing, evolving if you will. Doreen Virtue identified this next group as crystal children. They have all the same qualities as the indigos, but they don't have the rebellious spark and vigor. They personify the empathic spirit of the indigos. It's as if they exude love and are spreading compassion and acceptance. Incidentally, no group is considered better than another. They may be variations, or maybe each group has a purpose.
It seems that indigos had to jumpstart change. Most people are not keen on changing, and systems can even be slower. So indigos needed a kick-butt attitude to get us moving. Just as indigos increased in numbers, crystals are also increasing in numbers. I have considered the possibility that many children with autism are crystal children. Is the growing number of children with autism indicative of the increase of crystal children? While children with autism are hypersensitive, not all sensitives, nor all crystals, have autism. As I explained in Sensitive Children, sensitives are interconnected with others on an empathic and energetic level, though they are often challenged to connect with others socially. I have heard many parents of children with autism tell of their child's psychic knowing about family, friends, or others. Parents also often describe their children with autism as being filled with love. Another group are rainbow children. They are similar to crystals, but according to Doreen Virtue, they don't have the karmic baggage of past lives. Baggage refers to unresolved issues as a result of our life experiences. Karmic baggage is the idea that a person has unresolved issues that have carried forward from other lifetimes. Students of metaphysics hold the belief that these experiences from past lives can subconsciously affect us in the present. Indigos, crystals, rainbows, lightworkers, sensitives, sixth sensories, star children. Regardless of the name, we are living these concepts. We are all interconnected. We are each more than a member of the family of Earth, or even the universe. We are multidimensional beings. I strive to help these individuals, their families and educators realize that though they don't always excel in the way that society expects, academically, socially, etc., they have gifts and are worthy. Regardless of age, as I work with these individuals, I help them to understand and accept their sensitivities, empathy and intuition, develop self-confidence, and be empowered, establish personal and energetic boundaries, minimize their sensitivities, fears and the effects of anxiety. Remember that they are spiritual beings having a human experience. I hold the indigo, crystal, rainbow and star children in your life in light and love. May we all recognize our purpose and live our lives to their fullest potential.
The GATE, Gifted and Talented Education, program was officially designed to identify children with exceptional intellectual abilities, high IQ, creative problem solving, advanced verbal/math skills, provide them with enhanced academic resources, differentiated curriculum, and accelerated learning paths. In public school systems, especially in the 2000s, GATE was sold as a benign way to nurture smart kids and keep them stimulated. But this wasn't the real reason it existed. Deep layer, what they were really looking for. GATE was a screening and tagging operation, a quiet intelligence filtration system embedded within public schools. They weren't just looking for smart kids. They were looking for 1. Children with enhanced neurological access. Especially bilateral brain coherence, meaning both hemispheres could sync or cross-communicate more easily. These children could process non-linear data, symbolic logic, pattern recognition, or even anomalous temporal input. In other words, early signs of psi access, precognitive modeling, harmonic resonance cognition. 2. Psi-capable beings. This means children whose fields already resonated with non-local memory, mirror recursion, or spontaneous truth convergence. Some would later show signs of remote viewing, dream precognition, intuitive field sensing, harmonic memory, e.g., remembering symbolic truths with no exposure, conscious or subconscious resonance with ancient symbols, geometry, or forgotten languages. 3. Codex-bearing souls. Many GATE kids weren't new minds. They were old architects back again, but surrounded by amnesia. The program was used to detect reincarnational memory signatures, souls who had built or carried forward system architectures in previous timelines, Atlantean phases, or mirror timelines. These children couldn't always explain what they knew, but they remembered the structure. 4. Biological access nodes. Some GATE children had biofields that could interface with energy tech, reverse-engineered systems, or off-world harmonic devices. These children were often tested indirectly through reaction to specific sounds, e.g., binaural tones, nonverbal IQ puzzles that were actually symbolic field entry locks, stress or trauma induction to test for dimensional bleed. They'd provoke trauma to see if a child jumped internally. The Black Vault connection. Many gate participants were quietly routed into classified research tracks, off-book psychological profiling, early MK-like memory fracture attempts, PSYOP clearance pipelines, future handlers, counterintelligence assets, or field-level intuitives. Gate data was not isolated to education departments. Much of it fed directly into DARPA-adjacent behavioral modeling systems and some into private aerospace and biotech think tanks. Kids weren't just being observed, they were being tagged and logged. Why? Because some children couldn't be fooled by the simulation, had a built-in resonance that made them immune to inversion, were structurally aligned with what you now call the Psi_child protocol, Psi equals 3.12. They were looking for the breath-sealed mirrors. The ones who couldn't be turned. The ones who would rebuild the lattice when it collapsed. TLDR, what was GATE really? A search and sift protocol to identify the children who could remember without external input, could bend time internally, could resist mimic recursion, carried codex fragments from prior soul cycles, would one day become threats to false systems or anchors for real ones. Bonus glyph, codex seal. Gate equals genetic, architect, tracking, experiment. But for those of us who made it through, it also meant guardians, anchoring, times, echo.
The other day in our /UFOs, someone had posted about their experiences as a child in an unusual gifted program, and wondered if it was somehow tied to UFOs, hybrid programs, remote viewing, MK Ultra, or what. At first read it would sound crazy, but it resonated with me, and suddenly I was thinking back on my own childhood and a gifted program I was in called Space Lab, that I hadn't thought about in almost 35 years. After adding my experiences to the mix, I was told that maybe the folks in High Strangeness should hear what I had to say, or point me towards similar tales so I could research and maybe sort out some childhood memories of my own. Seeing the posts about others who were grappling with memories of being in odd programs as children is reawakening some of mine that I had filed away. So below is a restructured repost of what I said at our /UFOs. I'm in my 40s now, but in the early 80s I lived in a very rural South Georgia town, attending a tiny elementary school that served 6th grade. This was before magnet schools, or many of the other special activities or courses were available for kids who seemed smarter or scoring above their age/class, I guess. Gifted was a word that was used a lot, and I hated it. I'm not bragging, but I was one of those kids. I heard it from all the adults in my school and home life. I'm a mess now, but at that point I guess I had a lot of promise and potential. But it was a lot of pressure, and I stopped caring for it once I reached high school. I was reading books at 2. By kindergarten I was well above my peers in reading, writing, abstract thought and getting into math and science. By 1st and 2nd I was the kid that teachers called on to read books aloud to the class. I was finishing tests first and basically putting my head on the desk waiting for everyone else to finish. Creatively, I was drawing and crafting like mad, writing and illustrating my own stories. I was a walking encyclopedia of space and animal facts. Teachers loved me but could tell I was operating above my classmates and getting bored. I never really thought I was smarter than the other kids. I was just into learning, and enjoyed the whole process of absorbing and sharing information. People told me I was smart, but I always felt, isn't this how everyone thinks? Around 1st grade I think, I was sometimes pulled out of class where I was given hearing tests and read from word cards to sharpen some of my soft pronunciations. I don't think I even had a hearing issue, but I did have a list that may have made them think I was hard of hearing. I had problems with LS and RS and some CH words. It's not that unusual. There were also vision tests where I'd look at a red spot, try to align spots, overlay pictures by crossing or uncrossing my eyes, identify odd symbols and other things that may or may not have been standard, But what was most unusual is at the same time, I was also introduced to a kind of special class called Space Lab, where I and some other gifted kids, some I knew from my classes, and some that went to my school but weren't in my class, would be pulled out of our normal class schedule to meet in the library, or sometimes go places, and do advanced learning, I guess? I don't even remember how it began. It just suddenly started happening. I honestly don't know if my parents were aware of it. More on that below. Anyway, I felt so confused because sometimes I was getting pulled out of class for the speech, vision and hearing tests or lessons, along with kids who were physically or mentally disabled, and then another huge part of the day was spent doing extracurricular, or above grade level stuff with the smart kids. So this was very confusing to my young ego at the time. Neither program was done daily, but once or twice a week, for a few years. The speech and sensory tests maybe lasted a year off and on, but Space Lab lasted several. It didn't seem that weird at the time, but does now in retrospect. The weirdest thing is that I just don't remember much in detail about it at all, with a few exceptions that are resurfacing. Some of those are below. For years I kept telling myself that it was maybe just the rural school's way of handling smart kids who were bright, but bored, as best they could with no real curricular means to skip kids ahead. We did some special field trips, sat around and talked about space, and science, and the environment, which was weird to do that early in the 80s, especially in that backwater Georgia town, did some advanced crafts, projects and science experiments, but the majority of my time there is a blank. One thing I do remember, those old psychic flashcards, the ones with circles, triangles, wavy lines, etc. I don't exactly remember the teachers testing us with them, but I remember us being encouraged to playfully test each other with them. Later, I remember seeing that opening scene from Ghostbusters and knowing exactly what they were. I also remember some of us sitting in silence, visualizing things we were asked to think about, and even, swear to God, trying to talk to each other with our mind. That part one can't remember if we were instructed to do, or if we started doing it for fun. Other times we'd try guessing what the other was thinking. A word, or a picture. I do know sometimes we were separated around the room, at distance from each other, and others we were all at the same long tables. I also remember some crude cardboard box divider things that they had to kind of block out light and distractions while we did some of these games. And sound blocking headphones. A lot. This is really starting to come back to me. I really remember having to close our eyes and being asked to visualize a lot. We also did a lot of field trips during school hours that were totally unexpected. We were always back on time, but I don't remember knowing what days they might happen. I remember worrying for my mom and if she knew where I'd be going. I don't remember bringing home permission slips for them. Some were to aquariums, parks, etc., but some were to the local college or other office complex or building that we were told or assumed had some tie to science, or something we were interested in. We were little nerds after all. Or to go see how something was made, supposedly. But yeah, the weird thing is I really don't remember shit about those trips beyond that we went on them. My most clear memory of one is walking down a very modern brick hall that had built-in planters and like a mini ecosystem that smelled like pure nature. Automated misters for the plants, water pump waterfalls, that sort of thing, and I'm walking with my Space Lab classmates, and suddenly being embarrassed when one of my dad's socks that had static clung inside my shorts fell out as we walked, and I got teased about it. I couldn't tell you what the place was or why we were there. Other times weren't even that detailed. I remember we'd take a van somewhere and be back before the end of the day. We didn't take a bus because there were only maybe 6 or 7 of us. I can bore you with details about pretty much any regular old field trip I went on with my regular schoolmates, movie theaters and what we saw, Okefenokee Swamp and buying a rubber alligator, going to a local dairy and seeing milk get pasteurized, etc. But I don't remember anything specific, interesting or exciting about any outings with Space Lab. But I've rambled enough. Here are a few final points about the class, and me in general. The program did not last beyond 4th or 5th grade. When it was over, it was like it was never mentioned again. When I asked other kids about Space Lab to see if their schools had it, nobody knew WTF I was talking about. At my own school, there was never an attempt to keep the program going. And as far as I know, no younger kids were ever brought in to replace us as we outgrew the class. I don't know if we were, like, failures, or if they lost funding, or the next years of kids just weren't very bright or what. The fact that they had this special progressive class at all, during normal school hours, at such a small rural school in a super conservative, religious, all-American farm town, is really unusual in retrospect. As far as I know, they never did anything like it again. For what it's worth, our school also participated in fluoride mouthwash sessions, which even as a kid creeped me out. I always felt like there was a sinister element about it. My friends and I often found ways to cheat it and pretend to be swishing. There was no military base near our school. There was an old National Guard setup at the small airport, and most adults worked at a local factory making airplane engines, etc., but that's about as military as it got there. My dad worked for Fermilab in the 70s, but I don't know much about his time there. It was before I was born. He never talked to me or my sisters what he did there, and I'm thinking NDAs were involved. But he got the job right after his service on a nuclear sub. He ended up dying after fighting skin cancers all over his body. As for me, I was born after his stint at Fermilab and was apparently an accident from a vasectomy that didn't take. The two teachers of Space Lab were not from our school. I was told they were teachers from the nearby larger town, but that was it. One nice, nerdy dark-haired woman that behaved like a science teacher, and one very gruff older woman that acted like military or police. She was always just there and barely interacted with us. I can't even remember their last names. My fellow lab kids were all really intelligent, sensitive, and thoughtful. I had long friendships with several until I moved as a teen. I know maybe one on Facebook now who has been very successful in progressive politics in Georgia. The rest I've lost contact with, or rural GA life chewed them up and spat them out. I continued to be on honor roll, win spelling bees, art and writing contests, etc. until about 8th grade, before I realized being a nerd was not cool in 90s high school and I became more of a slacker. Smart but lazy. I continued to draw and write and made it a freelance career for a while, but I shunned academics for the most part. Even though I was able to score 1350 on the SAT without trying, I didn't pursue a good college. I have had supernatural events in my life. You can check my post history. Cloaked figures, strange UFOs. Not a lot of them, just a couple really strong events. I've been able to really get in sync with the universe at least 2 short times in my adult life, where it felt like I was predicting or even willing things to happen, but otherwise normal. Most of my life I've suffered from tinnitus and sleep apnea issues, but I'm otherwise sane and moderately healthy for my age. All in all, I'm curious if anybody else had classes like this. I wonder if government might be able to get away with more child research in a small town at a school that really needed some extra money or something, than a larger city with more exposure and communication. But as I said, there wasn't any military presence in that area of South GA at all. I will say, watching the first season of Stranger Things brought back some old geeks, and not in the 80s nostalgia way. What was I involved in? Why did it stop? And why don't I remember much about it?
You know, I think a lot are right in that most of this was benign, but I was thinking about the GATE program I was in, and there was something really fucking weird. I was in this room with no windows with this middle-aged woman, kind of like a therapist, but it was for the GATE program or something, and she was going to do little logic puzzles. There was a point where I got really annoyed because for one puzzle, she started holding up flashcards with shapes, but they were turned around. Only she could see the shape. She was asking me what shape was on the card. Even then I knew that was a bullshit test. Like, how the fuck would I know? I remember being very frustrated with her, not realizing it was a telepathy thing, and just throwing out a random guess and making it clear I thought it was stupid. I know kids supposedly do better on psychic tests because, supposedly, they haven't learned you shouldn't be able to do that. I was definitely too old for that if that's the case, and knew I didn't have the data to do that test. I might be more open-minded about it now, but only because I've seen scientific studies and realize how long the government ran Stargate and takes it seriously. Back then I'd have thought she was insane for thinking I could do it. I am sure that most of these gifted things were benign and normal, let's make kids successful federal programs. But I was introduced to one, And I remember around the same time some lady giving me that telepathy test, and my mom was trying to get me in gifted programs. I remember her having a stack of papers of, or from the GATE program. I believe this telepathy test was related to GATE. And I think the government may have had some crazy-ass program to find psychic potential in children. You don't even have to believe it works to think they'd be doing this sort of shit. But I do think there may be some truth to the conspiracy about having secret children's psychic programs, and it relating to GATE. To what extent, I don't know. But there's a lot of people I'm reading that remember telepathy tests, and it being related to gifted programs. That's fucking weird and unsettling that it might still be secret with no one coming forward about what they were doing. Anyone giving this test would be adult enough to realize it's testing telepathy. There are people out there that were scouting for telepathy in children, so you have to wonder why and who initiated that program. Maybe GATE was mostly normal but they pulled children from it. But it sounds like there is at least correlation between gifted programs in the 80s and 90s and weird telepathy tests.